The International Monetary Fund, IMF, has projected a slowdown in Nigeria's growth for 2024. This was according to the World Economic Outlook report. According to the report, Nigeria's economy is now expected to grow at 2.9% in 2024, maintaining the same growth pace recorded in 2023. The projection is 0.2% of a decrease from the previous projection in July and a 0.4% decrease from the previous projection in April. The IMF says the revision reflects slower growth in Nigeria amidst weaker than expected activity in the first half of the year. Paul Alaje, a chief economist at SPM Professionals, is here to speak with us on the IMF's claim that Nigeria's economy is not improving, the headwinds and measures needed to turn the economy around. Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us here on Newsday.
Good afternoon. Thank you so very much for having me.
So what do you make of this report and its findings?
Well, the reports stated some issues, some concerns why Nigeria economy is not improving. It looked at inflation. Inflation in Nigeria had a downturn from, I think, July and August, according to the IMF report. But unfortunately, September, October revealed that inflation has gone back really up. That on one side. Other things that you can notice in the economy, we have unemployment that was at 4%, is now back at 5.2%. And when I say unemployment is 5.2%, I'm not saying total number of people who cannot get job at all. We're referring to those who cannot get job for 1 hour a week only. That is, if you are a cab driver and you can drive from one point to another and be paid for it, whatever the amount, for 1 hour in a week, you are said to be employed. When those people were pulled, according to the National Bureau of Statistics, and this methodology was adopted through, what ILO had recommended, that is what is obtainable in modern economies. Now, for those who cannot get 1 hour least job a week in Nigeria, it's 5.2%. Imagine we are talking of 20 hours a week, which is just working for 4 hours a day for 5 days, or we are talking of 40 hours a week, then you know that we're talking of huge sum of number of people. That was not enough. IMF had projected Nigeria to grow above 3% earlier. IMF is now looking at Nigeria growing below 3% and says that it's a lot of concern about what this growth will be. Why will there not be concern? Inflation, key thing that IMF was added on to. Now, for me, Nigeria have tried to combat inflation through monetary authority. And when you look at what monetary authority have done is to raise interest rates. But who is creating inflation? That is why it's important for you to understand economics and not assume you know it. Inflation can be grouped into two. We have monetary inflation and non-monetary inflation. Monetary-induced inflation is a kind of inflation that is caused due to monetary activity. One, devaluing your currency. When you devalue your currency, that means you will need more to buy the same thing without increasing the value of what you are buying. Two, printing money or quantitative easing in some instances where we just feel ways and means is what we need to do, whether government has lent the money or not. Now, imagine $50 billion equivalent in Naira that was printed, and we still have the impact today. Now, the challenge we have today is that right now, it's not just about printing money. It's about deliberately bringing down the value of Naira, thinking that forces of demand or supply will abdicate price. Where are we competing with? Wait, how many votes around the world keep their FX in dollar? A lot. How many keeps it in Naira? Perhaps only Nigeria. So on arrival, you can't even win such conversation as a developing country. Two, I hear that it's been said that we now export more than we import. I said, yes, in Naira terms. In Naira terms, look at it in dollar terms. What was our export last year or 2 years ago and what is it today? Far below. Because you see, as an economist, export is done in a global currency. Export is not done in your local currency. So you need to look at what you earn in global currency last year compared to what you earn this year. And I also mentioned this. We are projecting 47.9 trillion Naira budget, for instance, for 2024, even though I know National Assembly may want to increase that figure as practice, as it has been their practice. But you know that amount is actually less than 30 billion that we did some 3-4 years ago. $30 billion. Because exchange rate is a factor. Now, what IMF needs to also understand, because IMF had been at the forefront of Nigeria supporting this reform. I was shocked when I read in the IMF report that we now need to go back and rethink the reform. So why did we remove the subsidy in the first instance? Why did we float the currency in the second instance? Look at the sequencing of the policy. Some of us, and I said, if I would be the only voice saying it, the policy is not right for a developing nation. It's tough to say, it's challenging to say, sometimes we might stand alone to say it. But today, global institutions are saying that this policy, look at Zambia, is coming out. Because Zambia did not follow the policy blindly. Look at Ghana. Ghana is also coming out. But look at Nigeria. Rather than us coming out, the growth rate is getting reduced, emaciated, inflation is increasing, poverty is increasing. And not my word that poverty increased. World Bank chief, a couple of months back said 10 million people, new, fresh people, have added to poverty brackets. So why are we going through all of this? Imagine, what is the productivity level of Nigeria? You cannot have a robust economy. You cannot. If your productivity level is low, two, you are not exporting sufficient. It's not to say that we are comparing naira to dollar. What if there are bottlenecks for import? So we can't import. But the little we have been exporting is see what we export. It will appear as though we are now doing more. But what happens to local manufacturers, especially those registered and not registered with Manufacturing Association of Nigeria, small-scale manufacturers? It's taking us months and months to tell whether our local refinery, that is even private sector, should work or not. Look at government refineries. We have been given promises. April it will work, and not just this administration. Remember that this refinery has actually been commissioned by the former administration, but it has not, we didn't see. Now, as though that were not enough, 2014, we were told the refinery will work in 2016. 2016, we were told it would work in 2017. 2017 will work end of the year. 2018, we were told, don't worry, this refinery must work. No, it was because of COVID. Now subsidy is gone. 2020, we were told end of the year it will work. Then the minister that even promised so much left it and went to contest election. And the refinery never worked. I'm talking of government refinery. 2021, we said, no, this is a new season. We are starting a new decade. Refinery must work. It never did. 2022, it never did. And we hear that it will work in September 2024. Are we still in September? The last time I checked, this is November. It has still not worked. So something is fundamentally wrong. Before now, NNPC, as of the 80s, had capacity to fix our own refineries. Until we felt that, no, let's give out that part to private sector to handle. So those who want to handle it believe that it is money for them, and they can be turning around like Baba's share as long as money is coming. So if we must make this country work as a developing country, and as a country that relies so much on crude, then we need to know that we need to make our refinery. If not, our people will suffer. Our people will be broke. People feel that subsidy is a bad thing. I read Economist, and I will tell you, countries, including America, America gives subsidy to cotton farmers. America gives subsidy to cotton farmers. People should read about Cancun talks. I did a presentation when I was undergrad on Cancun, where African leaders and those from other side came, and they were telling African leaders to stop giving subsidy. And Africans said, we will stop. But you must also stop giving subsidy to your farmers. Because how do you expect our people with local capacity, with small capacity to compete in the world? They said, we also cannot stop. Because our farmers cannot compete with the rest of Africa. Because you have the land, you have the natural resource, so we need to support them. So when you are giving subsidy, one way or the other there is, whether you call it shortfall or you call it subsidy. But is it now trickling down to the people? Because it is in trickling down we are able to tame poverty. It is in trickling down we are able to tame deprivation, and we're able to liberate our people. And I've said time and again, I saw the document recently released by the government regarding MTF, that dollar will now be 1,400. Now, what we have as of today is over 1,006. The other markets, which we don't want to mention, is about 1,700. But government is saying it will be 1,400. I quickly checked 2024 budget, 750. That was what is there. Today, 1,700. We are still in 2024. How realistic are our projections? You see, economic truth sometimes tastes bitter. But bitter drugs, not all the time, most of the time, they are things that will make the body whole. So how do we take them for the improvement of our body as a nation? Therefore, I feel that IMF has now agreed that we need to rethink these strategies. We need to rethink this policy. See, a nation, Russia, I like to cite several countries as example. Russia,
Mr. Alaje, let me just quickly come in here. First of all, I'm wondering if at this point we should really be listening to the IMF. I'm sure you recall that the action aid has called them, a harbinger of bad policies. Then I'm also wondering how we'll juxtapose, this IMF report, with the World Bank's call for the Nigerian government to sustain this current economic reforms for the next 10 to 15 years. How do we marry the two?
First of all, when World Bank made that statement, I also issued a statement that World Bank don't have the full picture. It is, you can assume that what you are saying is correct. Remember that in 2016, Christine Lagarde was in Nigeria and told President Buhari administration that Nigerian economy was resilient and will not go into a recession. I was in Abuja at the time, and I said this economy, unfortunately, has all the full-blown indicators to go into a recession. Nigeria went into a recession. Again, World Bank feels if we sustain it for 15 years, it will only lead us to more poverty, hunger, and deprivation. Why? Because the fundamentals are wrong. We are not producing. What is the quantity of power supply? I'm talking of quality and quantity. And I talk to you as a manufacturer. I talk to you as one, not just as an economist. Where if you put on your equipment, power surge could destroy several equipment. So it is not just about the availability of the light. How quality is the electricity? So we have not gotten that right. We understand that Band A now has more light, but the question is, who is checking with Band C and Band D? Because at the end of the day, if you give Band A more, because we are charging them more, it gives us more money. But what happens to rural community, people that also have access, that need electricity? And it's a basic requirement. So for me, IMF, whether we listen to them or not, this is not the first time. In 1986, we listened to IMF under structural adjustment program. What led to the end of structural adjustment program? The price of bread increased, price of garri increased, price of beans increased. Did Nigeria come out of that economic quagmire as a result of structural adjustment program? The answer is no. We didn't. At least all economists agree that structural adjustment program eventually did not deliver us from economic quagmire. So what is now these two policies among other policies? I was mentioning Russia. Russia adopted this policy in 1989. Similar policy. But do you know that rather than moving Russia forward, Russia had major negative economic impact from the policy? What are the policies? 1, remove subsidy. 2, reform taxes and increase taxes. 3, float the currency until Vladimir Putin came to Russia and review, in fact, cut taxes. Acted against the advice that were given by IMF and World Bank. Cut taxes. If you cut taxes, more people will pay. And you now have moral sanity to say, why are you not paying your taxes? So people should pay. But when people feel that the one we have paid, where is the justification for it? And I think that is what Mr. Oyedele's committee is looking at, on where people can also ask questions. I hope so. On what they've paid for. So that people can feel the impact of such in their lives. So when you look at those 3 policies, we have seen 2 evidently in Nigeria. Subsidy has been removed significantly. People now need to pay more. And when you say subsidy has been removed, maybe I should say technically prices have been increased because I think that is the technical way of putting it. But to say it in a way everybody will understand, subsidy has been removed and we have seen flotation of Naira. Will it come back to 1,004? Well, if the policy environment remains the same, I doubt. But if government is looking at pegging, I think we should be looking at 1,000 to 1,100. After we issue statement, we saw 2 months after that Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry also said for them to be sustainable, exchange rate should be around 1,000. And they hope that government will peg. It is not a crime to peg your currency. It is not a crime. I will give you countries in the Middle East. Their currencies are pegged. Pegged, and they give subsidy. What is the difference? Management of their foreign reserve. They don't give it to people who don't need it. So we have years and years, and just to be fair, Mr. President, years and years of people who have access to our reserve, spend it on personal gains, mismanage it, and we have somebody who is there who say, oh, this is the situation, we have to. No. The blame or the impact cannot go on the entire population. In implementing policy, sequencing is important because of exposure. If not, if somebody has, for instance, let me say for the lack of word, an infection and needs to take antibiotics. And doctor recommended he has to take 14 antibiotics. 1 in the morning, 1 in the evening, for 7 days. I think that's 14. And the person said, so I know the solution to my problem. Sorry, my friend, bring all the antibiotics. Goes to a pharmacy, bought the whole, and decide to take everything at once.
Oh, no.
That is wrong. That can damage the liver. That can damage. So in economy, because oftentimes economists look at what happened in medicine, why doctors take precaution to compare it to economy. So when you take some policies together, it's like taking that antibiotics, even though the intention is right, but the timing, the sequencing is wrong.
That's a really good analogy and a very clear way of explaining the situation that we're in right now. But just before we let you leave, what should be the expectations of the average Nigerian going forward? I mean, with the current crisis, what is a word of caution for us going into these next couple of months?
Well, what I would advise Nigeria is we have to remain hopeful. This is the only country we have. I don't have another passport. This is the only country I have. So as much as I will talk to Nigeria to remain hopeful, it's also important for government, IMF, that government have listened to regarding removing, increasing the price of energy, cost of electricity. They say we need to rethink the strategy. I think we need to. I've said this since last year, that don't start this policy because it will have this impact we are having. Now the impact has started. IMF is recommending to government, we thought you will come out of the crisis like other countries, but you have not been out. I think you should go and rethink your strategy. And I think we need homegrown economic policies that is not just to copy from other countries and bring to Nigeria. We need to copy, mix it, so that we don't look like we are copying whatever it's applicable, because we don't know the environment. You know, so for me, the people should remain hopeful and they should, you know, participate more in economic activities. Because whether we like it or not, it is certain that at the end of the day, things will be fine. Now, how long it will take for us to get to that end will depend on the policy we make in monetary arm, the policy we make in fiscal arm, and how we're able to combine all of this together for people to be better off.
And so, you know, while we are rethinking strategies, what about the issue of Nigeria's high debt, you know, burden? How do we reduce this, you know, and also borrow less over time?
Then, first of all, I think I've seen the borrowing plan, the proposed borrowing plan for 2025. I think we need to rethink it, especially foreign loan. Just a number of days back, I saw the executive muted idea of going back to the legislature to approve, I think, about 2.5 or $2.7 billion loan. That would be 2.2. Thank you so much. That would be disastrous because of fluctuation in exchange rate. Where will we get the money to pay back Naira? Do you know that between 2022 and 2024, not less than 3 trillion, and I'm being charitable saying 3 trillion, in the real sense it should be 5 trillion, Naira was added to our debt profile without borrowing money. You know why? Actually, the money may be as high as 7 trillion Naira. Why? When you devalue what you owe, you have devalued your exchange rate. It will affect everything. So whatever you are owing before will also be affected. What should we be doing? We need to be moderate. Find revenue windows, alternative revenue windows, which may not necessarily be imposing taxes on individual businesses, but there are people who are not paying. How do we bring them to tax bracket to ensure that they pay more? How do we encourage more businesses? Because when we have more businesses, more individuals to work, that is when we can get more money from them and make the economy going. So for me, if we must borrow, we should be limited mostly internally. And if there should be a ratio, maybe 80-20. But going out to source fund, it is really a big deal for this economy. Why? Because the exchange rate is not fixed. If it were fixed, then we can predict how much we pay. But we must continue this flotation policy, which I am saying in clear terms, it should have been stopped last year. The flotation policy should have been stopped. And I'm saying it again, if we continue, it can only spell more crisis for us as a nation. We don't have capacity. You cannot ask Anthony Joshua and Debo, Mr. Macaroni, to box. It's dead on arrival. Mommy, why we cry? It's dead on arrival. So when you say Naira should compete in a floating regime with the dollar or pounds or whatever currency you call it, and we are not producing, even the crude oil we say we have, what is the volume we are doing on daily basis? From January to June, not my figures. According to National Bureau of Statistics, we did about 1.4. Government have projected 1.8. Now, we recently moved towards 1.8 recently. But when you fly the average, it will still take us about 1.5. Can we say that we are actually meeting those targets. That is why, in clear terms, it's important. Remember that most of those groups, we have also had a forward pledge that when we borrowed money, that we were going to use them to pay off. So what is coming to receipt to our government? And again, is NNPC, has it been remitting because of other commitment, because of shortfalls to the FAC account? So these are issues. If you have this crisis, the last thing you want to do is to now make your currency weaker, because your sources of income of the same FX has been predetermined and is not coming to you. Therefore, doing that is cutting your nose to spite, your own face, or you are chasing your own tail. I don't know when you're ever going to catch that tail that you are chasing.
Listen, I don't think we've had a more exhaustive and comprehensive and humorous rundown of the state of our economy, but it was great to have you in the studio. Thank you so much for coming to talk to us, Paul Alaje. You're the chief economist at SPM Professionals. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much.